So hello to the community. Not a lot of people that have joined in so far, but hopefully we will have some more. Today's live is something I think will become extremely important for the future of boa breeding. For a long time, boa breeding has relied heavily on visual identification, assumptions, and sometimes educated guesses, I say. But this is something that's starting to change. Today we have Dr. Ben from RGI with us to talk about shed testing in boas, where the technology is today and where it may go in the future. We also have Nate Miller that works with Joe at JPC Boas joining us, which I think adds a really valuable breeder perspective to the conversation as well, especially when it comes to the recessives and also the discovery of the JPC albinos and the allelic combination with Carl. Before we jump into the session, I also want to mention that Boa University and RGI has officially entered a partnership together. As part of the collaboration, members of Boa University will receive 20% off on shed testing through RGI once the new website launches, which I think should be on Monday. For us, this partnership made a lot of sense because we strongly believe genetic testing is going to play an increasingly important role in the future of understanding boa genetics and project building. And honestly, I think with the news now that I think it's 33 years after Peter Carl produced the first Carl albino, we suddenly have something that is allelic to Carl, which I think is pretty cool. So I still think we're only scratching the surface and super interested to see the future. Let's see, we should have this one. So we have both Ben and Nate on.
How's it going?
Hey.
It's all good. So we start with Ben. To my understanding, like what I heard, I think it's like 2 years ago, was that shed testing on boas seemed so much more complicated than it was on ball pythons. And what it sounded like then was that we would probably need to wait at least 5 to 10 years for this. And then all of a sudden, we had the shed testing on boas.
Yeah. The biggest obstacle we had to start off with ball pythons was to get a good reference genome sequence, which costs tens of thousands of dollars. And then, so we were able to do that for the ball python. And so that's what made it go a lot faster for boas is we were able to, I guess it's been about 6 months back, we were able to get you got a hand up?
Stefan, I've been told that we are muted. Me and Ben. Or all of us, I guess, I've been told.
Yeah, it's probably me that hasn't. Really sorry, I forgot unmute in the school platform.
That's important.
Yeah. So we start over with finding out the shed tests on boas.
Yeah. So it became possible now. The very first bit with ball pythons that we were working on was getting a reference genome, and that costs a big chunk of money, tens of thousands of dollars to get that going. And we just assumed it'd be a while before we could do it in other species. But we just this last winter, we made an agreement with a nonprofit genomics group to help us so that we can do things faster and a little cheaper for us on our side. And so that's that group is called Hudson Alpha. So they helped us do the whole genome for the boa and for the hognose, the western hognose snake. And so, so that's what made boa test development possible now rather than having to wait even longer, because we do have a reference genome for the boa now.
That's sweet. And I know that like a lot of people have like questioned like why Aztec? Like to my understanding, it is like some genes just come out like super easy when you do the test, And I've seen like the graphs with all the small dots when you like need to guess that it could be this one and you're lucky.
Yeah.
Is it more of the luck, like to find the right dot and like to create the test for it, than it actually is that it's some genes are more difficult?
Yeah, so the very first thing that affects it is how many sheds we get. So if somebody that has a bunch of Aztecs gives us a bunch of sheds, then we'll have a whole bunch of material to be able to design from. So what we're doing with the software, if we sequence a whole bunch of animals, let's say call albinos, for example, we sequence a whole bunch of call albinos, and then we pull that data together, and then we compare, we have the software compare, and for each one of those individuals, say we sequenced 50 call albino animals, homozygous for that, then we pull all that information. Well, each one of those 50, we have probably 2 or 3 or 4 billion base pairs per animal. So we've got lots and lots of A's, T's, C's, and G's to compare. And then we take a pool of samples that we know are negative for call. They, from the breeder, we know they have no call in their ancestry, or sharp for that matter, just in case there was some crossing over there. So we use those two pools in the software, and the software goes in to the group of call albinos and looks to see what are DNA mutations in these call albinos that are negative in all of the others. And so it's trying to find that unique change. And sometimes it's just a single base change, like a T turns to an A or something like that. And that can make the difference. So that's what the software is doing. So the more sheds we have per, like if we have 75 versus 25, we're much more likely to be able to find it because we've got a lot more of the data that is telling us where call albino is. And so the more sheds that come in for a given morph, the more likely we can design a test quickly. Then once we have the sheds in and we start doing that work, then yes, kind of both of what you were saying is true. Sometimes the highest dot in that graph, that should be the one that is the most, they're only seeing that, the software is only seeing that mutation in call albinos and never in any other animals that are negative for it. And that's what would make that dot be the highest up. And so sometimes that highest dot, or, one of the top 3 is the hit that we're looking for. Aztec was kind of that way. It happened to be just one of the ones that was up there. It was easy to do and it worked right away. And when I ran a whole bunch of other, known positives and known negatives, and I had a couple of supers I could run too, and they all checked out, worked perfectly. So we made that available. 6 months or a year from now, people probably aren't even going to remember that was one of the first ones, but it just happened to be that way. And so we just are making them available as they work. Some of the mutations are a lot more complicated. They're bigger. Sometimes we'll have like a 5,000 or even a 50,000 base pair chunk of random sequence get inserted into the middle of a gene. And that makes that gene not be able to work anymore, which can cause a color or pattern change. So it can be all kinds. It can be just a one base change. It can be a little deletion of 1 or 2, or it can be an insertion of 1 or 2, or it can be an assertion of like 50,000. There's just all kinds of different things. And some of them are easier for us to catch than others.
Interesting. How many sheds would you say that you need for a specific morph, like on average, for it to be considered like it's reliable? I know that you're like categorizing like A, B, C, something, like on the accuracy on the tests.
Yeah, so for test development, the very first step when people are sending sheds in, we like to see at least 20 to 40. And if they can be homozygous for that trait, that's great. Obviously, some of them, we can't get. There's not a whole bunch of super IMGs. Some of the others, we don't have access to homozygous samples. But if we can get 20 to 40 homozygous, like for call, albino, and sharp, things like that, that was doable. That's a good starting point. But if we can get like 70 or 80, that's way better. If it's something like IMG, where we're not able to get a bunch of homozygous samples, it's nice to at least have 50 if we can, and get that closer to 100 if possible. And even then, you know, some of them are really fast like Aztec, and others are complicated and take a while. Even if we have enough sheds, it's still difficult for the software to pull out the difference.
Yeah. And I guess that you're like open for like all the morphs that hasn't just been like sequenced, that is the tests are ready. You're happy to take test sheds. So that's for the community. If you have anything, maybe you don't need to like send in call, NFI, and Aztecs, but other stuff, even if it's like combinations of it, and then preferably homozygous animals. We definitely are going to send over a whole bunch of test sheds for you to have for. And I can guess, like, I think this year and last year, there's been quite a lot of breedings that has been like surprising for people. And I guess that this can also put a stick in the wheel when you're developing tests, like when there's something in that, yeah, this is sharp, but it actually is call. Or like, for instance, we actually have like a double visual VPIs that is most like, they are T negative also due to they have red eyes. But they come from like homozygous VPI to homozygous VPI pairing. So they are definitely VPIs. So those we're going to test to see if they are calls. But like when we done the research back, the grandfather is a male that is bought from another breeder, but they have no clue that there should be any like T negative albinos in it. But I guess this goes back to like when Dave and Tracy, when they started the VPIs, they were bred to a lot of call animals. So I would guess that this could be a bit difficult when you are like designing the tests for it also.
Yeah, that was part of the issue with call. It took a little bit more time, and sharp has taken some more time, but that's one that I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to finish off here pretty quick. So we'll have that too. But that was part of the issue, was, you know, that we have for sure confirmed that some of the animals that were sent in as homozygous for sharp were actually homozygous for call instead. So
yeah, I would guess so. And it's been a surprise for a few breeders, breeding visual to visual and getting a full litter of normal. But looking at the list for, we now know that call albino, and this is like what I think is like super cool. I think it's 1993 when Peter Call produced the first visual call albinos. So it's like 33 years down the road that we finally have something that is allelic. And this, I think, is like super cool. And we actually had like one of the first live sessions we did with the founding members here on Boa University. We actually had Joe and Nate on. But then we discussed it more of that the NFI would be like an incomplete dominant trait. But like looking at the animals definitely put some question marks in my head, where like, how could it be that it actually cancel out the red eyes? But now when it's allelic and the same as a paradigm, it definitely makes a lot more sense. And I do think that we have a lot to say thanks to Nate for that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, it was a long time coming. It was going to happen sometime. Just someone needed to kind of kick everyone into gear there. And I think that me coming along and pushing and everyone saying, this doesn't make sense, definitely got everyone moving on that. But it was, I mean, nothing was making sense from a customer perspective. Like you were saying in the video, there were a lot of questions that were brought up, and nothing was making sense from the breeder perspective too. Just the results that we were getting were so wild that it finally makes sense. So eventually someone was going to figure this out. But you know what's actually really interesting is there's an old forum post back on Kingsnake in 2009 where Joe posted the original litter, and there was a guy I think named Mike who commented. He was like, everyone in the comments was saying in the thread, they were all saying, oh wow, the odds beat you up on this one, crazy odds in this litter, stuff like that. And this one guy, he's saying, I think that could be a new mutation, and he had it right all the way back then in 2009. So
yeah,
definitely is quite cool. But that's also, I think, goes back to like a lot of times we see people like, yeah, I found a new gene, where it later on doesn't proves to be a new gene that is actually something polygenic. This is something where actually I've talked quite a bit with Caleb in Boa University. I've been talking quite a lot with you about, and he's been like super excited that you probably later on is going to be able to like test for lineage influence, polygenic stuff. I know you can do some tests on polygenic traits in ball pythons. But that has to be like much more difficult to design, or?
Yeah. So if like most of the morphs that we are talking about, and like in this list here, that it's just a single mutation, like for the call albino, that was a single mutation, and if you're homozygous for it, you get that phenotype. And so we can design a test that just looks at that one thing that influences whether it's going to be a call albino or not. With a polygenic trait, poly is many, genic is gene, so it's more than one gene that affects one trait. So it could be, I don't know for sure. I guess pastel is probably a good example in boas. I did a lot of carpet python breeding, and it seemed to be in most of the species or subspecies, however you want to think about them. Striping seemed to be polygenic. It wasn't something like in a ball python that you could just breed with a single gene and be able to get a stripe, like a genetic stripe. So since there are multiple genes that can affect a single trait, a polygenic trait, then let's say if there were 7 different genes that affect it, then you would need to have 7 different tests, and you'd need to know what a combination of each of those 7 does. Like if you have, homozygous for all 7, is that the most striped or the least striped? If one of them is way more influential than the others, but the others still make a difference, like if you're homozygous for one and negative for all the others, you still might get some striping, but because that has a large effect. But others, they may only have an effect if there's 3 or 4 like that are homozygous. So there's just a lot more variation that can come in when you're testing for something that's polygenic. So it is more complicated, and you do need a larger database. So that's a big part of what we're trying to build. Obviously, we're a lot further with ball python than any other species, but as we start to be able to do a lot more whole genome sequencing and registering animals, and Sean and I were talking about Sean, my business partner, for those of you that didn't know that are watching, talking about questionnaires for information that we may want to have from people as we start doing more and more of that. That could be some things like polygenic traits. It could be lineage information. It could be litter size. It could be slug rate. There could be all kinds of different things that those essentially are also polygenic traits. There are multiple genes that can affect the size. Like in humans, I think the latest publication, they had 10,000 genes that they were able to show play some part in how tall you're going to be or how short you're going to be in humans. So there's many different markers. Some are going to make a bigger difference than others, and as we get a larger database of reptile samples that we've sequenced, we can start answering more of those questions. And so that will take a while, and hopefully it'll end up being like with boas, and we think it's going to take 5 to 10 years, but really in a couple of years, if a whole bunch of people are getting things sequenced and we're building that database, we might be able to start answering some of those polygenic questions also.
Yeah, we definitely have like 2, which I believe is polygenic, but it's connected to like the blood, where others believe that it actually is like incomplete dominant traits. But we're definitely going to be able to send some stuff of that in to see, because that would be interested to see. But I'm quite sure it's polygenic, that if you would remove the blood completely, then it doesn't going to display it. But that's definitely is quite interesting. And I think we are, like with the shed test, I think there are going to be new things that is going to be proven that it actually is a single gene. But I also believe that there are a lot of fancy names that might go in the ditch.
Yeah. We've had both things happen with the ball python, where they think two different things are two different things, but we find out with genetic testing actually the causal mutation is like Phantom and Mystic are both morphs that when you're homozygous you get like a blue-eyed leucistic type of animal. And breeders thought they could tell them apart, but that we at least know that causal mutation that makes it het for leucistic is identical in the two. But we've also had it the other way around, where is several times actually in albino, ultramel, yellow belly. There's several of them where, as a breeder, we only see one mutation. We only see one morph. So like a yellow belly, I would look at a yellow belly, they all look the same. When you breed them together, you get an ivory. So it's another form of leucistic. So they all look the same. The ivories look the same, but there's actually two different mutations that can cause that. One's a -1 deletion and one is a -17 deletion. And then, like I said, ultramel, same. Albino is the same. There's black pastel. We think there's at least 3 different mutations for that, and there could be more. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we see a similar thing in boas, or if it's even more complicated, or maybe it's more simple. But we won't know. So far, at least with the tests that we've done, the Anery and the call albino and what we're seeing with Sharp, it doesn't seem like we have, multiple mutations causing it. But, the more samples we have come in, we may learn there is another mutation. Then obviously we may find something else that's allelic, like we found with the NFI, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think like one of the interesting parts is where when you have animals that comes from different regions, for sure animal can move in the wild and spread their genes, so it could end up that it actually is the same. But a lot of times you can see, like for instance, if we look at the difference between RDR, black-eyed aneries, and like the carbons, I don't have it like 100% confirmed, but what I understand is that where Kenny got like the original Aztec comes from like the Potts brothers, and they have the translucents, which probably is the carbons. But what's interesting, like to my understanding, when he produced like the first one, is that the other animal actually came from Tracy at VPI, and those have Colombian origin, where like the black-eyed anery is Central American. But and I think like I guess that you can also like see this in tests, that even if you have like I think this might be the case with some of like, if we would call them T positive, just to distinguish the different albinos, that some of them actually create something together even if they come from separate regions, but it doesn't always then mean that it's the same gene. They can just work together anyway. Is that correct?
Yeah. In that case, what we've seen in the ball python so far, it will be mutations in the same gene still, but they're different mutations. That can happen. So like with ultramel and albino, so that one gene, like for albino and ultramel, it's been published. The albino in ball pythons is in the TYR gene. So there's actually 2 different places in the genome where there are mutations. And so you can have an animal that's heterozygous for one and the other that looks albino, or you can have an animal that's homozygous for just one and looks albino, or homozygous for the other and looks albino. So they're completely compatible, but they are 2 separate mutations. So it would be 2 unique origins that happen in the wild. But from the breeder standpoint, you can't tell them apart. So that definitely can happen.
Yep.
So just to mention, that's what I thought we were dealing with NFI, by the way. When I thought we had 2 separate mutations, and I'm, again, saying here, I was wrong on that. I thought it was 2 separate mutations based off of the results that I had seen prior to me working here. I thought we were dealing with another mutation on basically looked the same, but it was a separate mutation, and that would have explained how he got the 1 in 69. But I thought the color variation was still due to NFI being an incomplete dominant trait, which now we know is not the case. It's just the allelic morph with call is the NFI.
I think you're breaking up a little bit, Nate. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, but it was just
I'm not sure how much you caught of that.
Yeah, but we heard everything. It was just cutting out a little bit. I'm not sure. I know when we had a call the other week when it was, but now you're quite close to the phone.
I'm close to the phone.
Yeah. But that definitely is like super interesting. And like looking at, I know we had a question in the community about like the locality boas. Have you gotten sheds and started to like do testings on the locality stuff?
Not very much. There's a little bit that we have, but yeah, by far the vast majority of what we call a T positive boa has just been VPI animals. So yeah, we would love to get more Central American. I guess if we want to be more correct, we can call them putative T positives.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would love to get more samples. Any of you that have some, even if you just have one or two, send them in as we get the VPI test finished off. Then we can, obviously we could just run any of those locality ones and just see, and we can also sequence around where the VPI one is. Once we know exactly where the VPI one is, then we can sequence around there and say, oh, for this Central American one, it's just, 1,000 base pairs to the right or whatever. So yeah, we would love to get those samples.
Yeah. I do think we have a few people in the community that have some different, both Hondurans and Costa Rican stuff. And yeah, so that's definitely interesting. So I know that, like, I'm not sure how to formulate the question, but we had they had a discussion like on several posts in the community. That's something that really like messes up, especially for new people, is that when they start to understand, okay, heterozygous, homozygous, it's 2 copies, like the 2-slot system. And then you get to like the paradigm stuff. And now we also have like the NFI with the JPC and call, where they get like quite confused with how it can be that, okay, it's heterozygous, but it's a visual. And I know something that might mess it up a little bit is like how Morph market labels, like when they are advertising like paradigms, it says that it's het albino, het sharp, het boa woman caramel, because like they are het for one or other, but they should probably be able to create a label just to have it's het for one or other. I'm not really sure where I'm going with the question. I just know that this is confusing for newer people.
So one thing, this kind of hurts your brain the first time you hear it, but if you think about it a little bit, I think this helps a lot of people with this specific problem, or I guess kind of getting it to settle into your mind and make sense. So if you think of, like in that case, either a sharp albino or a boa woman caramel, that visual animal, it's not because it has 2 copies. So a sharp albino isn't necessarily because it has 2 copies of sharp. It's because it has 0 copies of normal for that gene. And so when you have a sharp albino, you have 2 copies. So it's homozygous, or it has 2 copies for that sharp mutation. But if you have 1 copy of the sharp mutation, 1 copy of the boa woman caramel, it still has 0 normal copies, because 1 is a sharp mutation, 1's a boa woman caramel mutation. And so that's why it's visual. It's not necessarily because it has 1 copy of sharp, it's because it has 0 copies of normal. And so when you look at that, you would have to know that boa woman caramel and sharp are allelic. As long as you know that, you see, oh, it's got 1 copy of sharp, 1 copy of boa woman caramel. That means it has 0 copies of normal at that gene that sharp and boa woman caramel are in. So that, I think, kind of helps connect the dots for some people. Maybe it makes it even worse for others, though. But
yeah, but in one way, that's actually quite smart to say that it actually isn't any, like there's no normal gene, because they try. There are several people where they try to explain it, where it's like, yeah, but it's this, but it's still like, how could a het create a visual? Yeah, because they are allelic. They sit together and then they create it. Yep. So that's definitely is.
Yeah, and like experimentally, we can show that too, because in science, we can take part of a chromosome out, and sometimes it naturally happens. So say the chromosome that came from the sire, say the sire was a sharp albino, so both copies he gave to that offspring have the sharp mutation, but the chromosome from the mom that has that same gene, part of it got lost, so it got cut out. And so it can happen where you would have a boa that only has one copy for that gene that came from the dad. The second copy got cut out from the mom's chromosome and it's just gone. And in that case, that animal would look like a call albino or a sharp albino. It would visually look like that, but it only has one copy of sharp, of that mutation. And the reason why it looks like it is not because it has one copy of sharp, it's because it has 0 copies of normal.
But that is quite interesting, actually, that you have. How often have you seen that happen? Like, that has to be like super rare still.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
That would definitely
rare.
like mess with the breeder's head when you're like, it's a visual and you breed it and like, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. If you did have that happen for a morph, a color pattern morph like an albino, that would make it confusing for sure. Yeah, it's extremely rare. We can do it on purpose with CRISPR. We can go in and just cut one out, and then it's no longer really a het because there's only one copy. So het usually means you have 2 different copies. Yeah. But if there's only one copy there, you can't be 1 out of 2. You just have one. Whatever the one is that you have, that's all you have. So
definitely interesting. So Nate, how would you feel if you had a visual sharp that you bred and
that was only one copy of sharp? Oh my god. That would be the second NFI boa right there. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that'd be really difficult. So basically it would be able to pass on the deleted allele basically too. So even though it's going to look like a visual sharp, it's going to behave like if it was a het, basically.
So if that were to happen, it would depend on how big that deletion is and if that animal could still live. This is like a theoretical thing that we have done with CRISPR, and we have observed more in like human genetics and stuff like that. So
but this hasn't specifically happened to someone with a boa yet or a snake yet.
Not that I know of. It certainly could have. The vast majority of the time. So there's 1.7 billion base pairs. So there's probably boas that have had that happen, but the majority of the sequence, if part of that chromosome drops out, it doesn't affect anything. It doesn't look any different. It doesn't have any reproductive changes or whatever. In this case, if that little bit of the female chromosome that dropped off was just a small part of that gene, then it probably would give a look like a call albino. But if it was like a giant piece of it, then it might make it so that it can't live. That genetic change would be there, but it would not be able to live and thrive and reproduce. So it just depends. I'm just using that as an example of why we know that it looks like an albino because there's 0 copies of normal, not because there's 2 copies of albino. That's how we know experimentally. We've shown that, because if we get rid of one of those chromosomes or one of those genes that's on the second chromosome, so it's just not there, you still get that same look.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
Sweet. I hope you guys in the community appreciated Ben's explanation about that, and it made it more clear. I really hope that I already messed up with even more.
Yeah, I hope it didn't cause more problems than it solved.
No. Uh, so if we go back to have a look, we have like the coming soon list. Do you have anything to disclose? What's like close to release or?
Yeah, so Sharp and VPI, I think that I'm very, very close on. Blood and Leopard right after that. I've got good. So Sharp and VPI have very specific information that I'm trying to validate now. So it's kind of like in our last stages of validation. And like we've talked about on our show, you know, sometimes we'll get to the very end and something messes up and we have to go all the way back to the beginning again. So it could be a month from now, you'd be like, hey, Ben, I thought you said you're going to have Sharp or VPI, and be like, well, final validation failed. And so we're back to the beginning. But anyway, Sharp and VPI are in the final stages of validation. Blood and Leopard, I have a general location, so it's not specific yet. And I'm digging through. Sometimes that general location will be, 200, 300,000 base pairs. Sometimes it'll be like 3 or 4 million. And I just have to go through the genes that are there and look and see, what makes the best sense. So those two are still a little further out. Motley and Hypo, and then it's a similar case with the RDR and the carbon. Those genes are kind of messy and are more difficult to figure out what's going on. So I do know pretty fairly specifically where those three are, but I'm not able to get a clean test for those three yet. And it might take me a little bit, but we're working on them.
Yeah, sweet. Question, like when you do, like when you're developing the test, is it easier to have, like, for instance, like a homozygous leopard that isn't het for anything else? Or does it matter if it's like, let's say, like the habanero, it's a hypo homozygous leopard and homozygous VPI? But I guess that like the cleaner animal would make it easier, like when you get like the sequencing out.
Actually, for us, the way we do it, it's good either way. So like if we get a multiple, so you'll have to tell me what all's in the habanero.
Yeah. The habanero is hypo VPI leopard.
Oh, hypo VPI leopard. Okay. Yeah. So in that case, we would mark that sample as having hypo VPI leopard. So when we go to develop the leopard test, we can put it in as being a positive and homozygous for leopard. And then when we do the VPI test and we want to have any negatives, it's already marked as having leopard in it. And so it won't get included as the negative for VPI. So the software, since we've tagged it, essentially, we would tag that habanero with all three of those. Then the software knows which test development to include it in as a positive, and then which ones it can be a negative and which ones it can't be a negative. It knows it can't be a negative for, like, if we're doing the VPI test, we know it can't include that animal for, leopard or any of the other things that it has. So anyway, even if you've got several genes in there, we can use that shed. That's actually more valuable to us. So we could use that shed to develop the test for hypo, for leopard, and for VPI.
Yeah, good to know. It was just quite interesting. We got the question here: are RDR and carbon then the same? They have been. It's been huge discussions about this also. I know that you just said that it's a messy gene when it comes to tests, so probably going to take a while. And that there, I also think like what can become difficult is like looking at like RDR BEA, like Ralph Davis, like the original origin. But you also have like, we don't call our like lineage RDR anymore. We just call it BEA because it doesn't look like the RDR because it's been like selectively bred to one direction. And so it's probably more difficult, I would guess. And you just have to wait for that answer, Ralph.
Yes. We are definitely working on that. The one we're closer to is Prodigy and Boa Woman Carmel. And I think in the next week, I'll have a pretty good answer on that, whether those are for sure the same or for sure different. We should have an answer for that. RDR and carbon is a little further out. That'll take a little more time, but we are definitely very interested in that question as well.
Yeah. One I would really like to see is jungle, due to like today you have so many like low expression jungles, where like super jungles isn't like super motleys, but they are a bit more painful to get to thrive, and they are most likely not ever going to breed. So you will end up selling them as pets, even if it would be like a super high morph combination with several, like 4 or 5 different genes. You still can't like put any value to it. It's more to give it away to someone that wants a nice snake. So how do you know how you're looking at jungle?
So we do have a pretty good number of jungle sheds that we have already sequenced and are looking at. And this week I actually got more data that we are processing right now. So I haven't been able to analyze it yet. But so far for jungle, I'm not getting like a clean signal. Like I know for sure where to start looking. So one thing I was interested in, and by no means am I saying that I know whether this is true or not. I just think this would be good for those of you that have been breeding boas for a while to kind of have the battle in your own mind, or maybe with each other, be like, okay, is jungle one mutation, or is it polygenic? I'm just not getting a clean location yet. And maybe this next batch of data I would just be interested in seeing people that have worked with it for several years. If you kind of had that battle in your head, like, well, like you just said, some lower expression ones. And like I see pos jungle a lot more than some of the other ones. Yeah. So what I'm wondering is there a chance? And like I said from the beginning, my disclaimer, I'm not saying that I think it is. I just want people with some experience to kind of think that through and see if that's a possibility, because that would obviously make a big difference in how we go about trying to provide some kind of test for it. It would be, like we talked about earlier, more complicated if it is.
Yeah, definitely interesting. I would definitely say that it is like incomplete dominant, like seen to the ratio when you end up breeding jungle to jungle. Sometimes, like especially when you're like starting to put Hypo, IMG, when it mixed with Labyrinth, like it's super difficult to sometimes distinguish. And you definitely have a huge difference in how the jungle expresses itself. Like we have, like for instance, like in our, like the Spectre lineage, we have like the DPI, like Anery stuff, like that is like a super strong. It's you can't mistake that it's not a jungle, but there is definitely like a big problem. So I definitely think that it would be like super strange, because like if it wouldn't be, because then when you end up breeding like a clear visual jungle to something that's very, very low expression, but you get the ratio like about 25% super jungles. So I would be surprised if it wasn't like, but it could, I'm not sure if it still could be like relying on several different genes and still behave the same way. But to the breeding results, I would say it should be like a single gene.
Has someone been able to get a super jungle to breed, or are they don't thrive well enough to be able to breed?
Like our experience is like it's no, like get them to thrive is no problem, but there's definitely like a fertility problem. I do think there's been someone that actually managed to produce a litter from a super jungle. But this is like super rare. It's the same like when you get to like the jigsaw, that is a combination between Key West and Roswell Laddertail, that most of them don't ever get to breeding age, where I know Tim had one that did breed, but it also died quite soon after. But in general, it's not a huge problem to get the super jungles to thrive and like live a happy life. They do everything as they should, but the fertility part is the problem, I would say. And that's also then interesting, like why do they have the fertility problem?
Yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, and maybe part of that problem is what we talked about earlier. Maybe some of the samples that were sent in as jungles aren't actually jungles, and that's what's, you know, making it difficult for me to get a clean signal. That's also very possible. That would give me the kind of results I'm seeing. If some were submitted as being jungle, but they're not actually, then that would make it take longer for the software to find it. So that could be.
Yeah, I definitely know that. Like, for instance, on the cage right next to me, we actually have like the Superstripes. That is, like, through breeding trials, it's proven to be a recessive trait. It's Central American origin, but they do look like, as heterozygous, they definitely have markers. They look like jungles when they are heterozygous, where like as homozygous, you have the super clean, like full stripe on them. But that can definitely be mistaken. And you can also, I think we ourselves, like in the beginning, what we talked about previously, like I think there's polygenic stuff connected to the bloods, where we definitely have some like VPIs, het blood and blood het VPIs, and also some like double visuals, where if you would look at them, you would think jungle. And I think it's possible that we have had some of them where like, yeah, this has to be a jungle. But then later, when you breed something back, it's like, no, it's not jungle. Then all of a sudden it doesn't, you don't get the ratio of it. So I definitely think that when it comes to jungle, that could probably be a lot of tests like sent in where it might not be jungle. And that's probably is going to confuse the hell out of you guys when you're trying to figure out what's what.
Yeah, so any of you that do happen to have some super jungle, even if it's like a animal that passed away that's in your freezer or whatever, those homozygous samples would be really valuable. If you know for sure you have some homozygous ones, some super jungles, we could use those sheds, or, you know, if you do have it frozen in the freezer, you just, you know, cut a little piece out and put it into a Ziploc and send it. That would help us with the jungle test. I think, given, you know, what you're saying, I think that's the most likely explanation, is we just have some dirtiness in the samples that we've been given for jungle that are making the software kind of not be able to give us a clean answer yet.
Yeah, we definitely have one super jungle, I know, and I know we have one other member that has a super jungle, so we definitely can get you some sheds for it. What's your opinion, Nate, on the jungle?
Yeah, I honestly, I can't know for certain until I see it happen with my own two eyes, but I have heard directly from someone that they have bred a super jungle. So it's possible that maybe they thought it was a super jungle and it wasn't, or it's possible that they're just wrong and they didn't breed a super jungle. But I have heard of someone breeding a super jungle. The thing that really surprised me was that I was.
So I was just going to say, do they have a picture of the litter? I'd love to see the picture of the litter.
No, I don't. Yeah, and that's the thing is, like I said, I don't really, I haven't seen enough to believe it 100%. I've just been told, oh, I bred a super jungle, but the thing that really surprised me was it was a female, which meant it took even longer time to get up to size, to breeding age, and then if it's still bred, I mean, that's very surprising to me. I would expect maybe a male, because you can get him up to size sooner, but I don't know. I don't really have enough experience with that. What I do have to say is we definitely have some stuff that appears to be jungle, super stripy looking, can often get like the chain link kind of back type thing going, but it's not jungle. And that like Stefan was saying, that runs through our blood stuff a lot. Like our sharp blood stuff, we just had a sharp blood litter. We have a completely striped up sharp sunglow blood. And a lot of the bloods in there also have striping on them. So I think there definitely is some polygenic stuff going on with the bloods that gives them something that can appear similar to jungle.
Okay.
Yes, I do think and that can definitely mess things up. But we can definitely, get some homozygous, but also like some where it's like they are like super strong, even if they are just heterozygous. It's like totally clear that they are jungles, like no questions. So we get as many as possible of that. I'm just reading some comments to see. They are discussing if it could be a possibility that there could be multiple jungle genes. I don't think Brundle from Sweden would agree, the guy that discovered the jungle from the start. Then we had a question, let's see. It was about one of the members that sent in sheds for like amber and Mandarin belly. I know that they are today rated as single gene mutations, but there's definitely some question if it is single gene mutations. But it's more of a question. I do guess that you don't have a lot of sheds, and that is how they can help to get clarity in that regard. Like you need more sheds, I would guess.
Yeah, for sure. Mandarin belly, I do think that we've at least had someone talk to us about that one. What was the name of the other one?
Amber.
I don't remember if we have any amber sheds. It's definitely less than 5 because I don't. That's not one I remember. Mandarin belly, I at least remember talking with someone about. I actually just emailed someone about that, and it was like a reverse stripe, genetic reverse stripe. So yeah, like we said earlier, we kind of need like 20 to 40 sheds to start. Really have a chance, but we do have some new technology that we hope to have by the end of the summer that will help us be able to get that with less samples to start with. So, if we have only 5 to 10 by the end of the summer or sometime in the fall, we at least have a chance at it. Whereas right now, unless we got 20 to 40, I probably wouldn't start sequencing yet.
So, they say they get more. It's a European guy, but he already sent some over to Teresa, I think.
Yep.
So they are hopefully going to arrive. But it's just 4 so far, but he's going to get you more.
Yeah. The other thing that can help on a new project like that is if you have reason to believe it's allelic with something else, that can help us because then we know what gene to sequence. So if it's a new mutation, but it seems like it is allelic with something, then that's when that rule doesn't necessarily hold. We could find it with less samples. Like if it's clearly an albino and you've bred it to, all of the known albino lines, it's not compatible with any of them, then, we still have a chance to find it because we know it's albino, and then we would know it's not in the same gene as the other albinos, but we can look in, because there's about 10 different genes that are known in vertebrates to cause albinism. So that's another way. That's another one that could kind of make it a little easier for us. So either if it's allelic, you think it might be allelic with something, or if it's, something like albino or Anery or Hypo, something where we know what genes cause that, then we may be able to find it with less samples. So the Mandarin belly, if it's similar to something like that, where we might know what genes to look in, we could get lucky. But otherwise, that kind of 20 to 40 rule will apply.
I do think but this can also be the same thing that has been going back to jungle, if you would look like Mandarin belly, because there's a lot of them where you could definitely consider this would be a super and this would be the heterozygous animal. But I could then also be that it's been mislabeled, just because something has been a bit colorful, it's been labeled Mandarin belly, and then they bred it, and then we definitely see this a lot, especially with all the polygenic stuff, where you put all the pastel names on, even if they doesn't live up to the name anymore.
Yeah, in those cases, it's really helpful if someone's already worked with that mutation for 3 or 4 or 5 generations, and then they have all those animals and they know what does look like what they're seeing and what does not. Then we're a little more likely. But yeah, if it's something where someone could have another animal, like you said, that could look like it's Mandarin belly, and then just starts calling it that, and breeds and sells offspring, and those people don't even have a clue to know that that's from a separate origin that is likely not the same, then that makes developing a test really hard.
Yeah. Sweet. So I do think how to say it, it's definitely is exciting with shed testing. Big part, I think sometimes it could be like a bit of a misconception with new people that they think like, oh, hallelujah, now we're going to get the keys to the kingdom. And in one way, you definitely get it. Like when making new projects, like you can do like the whole POS het stuff and then just test instead of holding back 20 animals. Maybe you just need to hold back 5. So that definitely is like reducing the space required to prove out stuff that previously took some time. And but what would you say, like looking at the ball pythons, that there you have a lot of tests, that has been like the most beneficial part of the shed test and what we could see for boas?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, like an example, which, this isn't a fun part of the hobby to talk about, but, if you bought POS hets back in the day, there's some times where over time people realized, oh, all the people that bought POS hets from that one guy, none of them proved out. They probably weren't 50% hets. So right off the bat, when we released testing for ball pythons, there were 2 or 3 instances where people came to us and let us know that they had purchased these were like $20,000 or $30,000 transactions. A few high dollar animals, a really big. At least to me, that's a substantial purchase for animals. Yeah. And that person had not been honest, and they got busted right away. So it's kind of nice that it will kind of decrease some of that. Another really big plus is that, Justin Kabelka, who's helped us from the beginning and done a lot of this, he said that it's really interesting from a sales standpoint. What he's seen is that if he has something that's a POS het, he has a harder time selling it. So he would maybe price it a little higher than what a negative. So if it doesn't have, like in this case, let's say it's not het for sharp, but it's a POS het. So if he sold it as not having that het sharp, he would price it a little higher than that because it's a POS het, and then obviously significantly higher if he knew that it was a het. But what he's saying from the psychological standpoint for people that are purchasing the animals, they don't want to see POS hets. Like, they might not consciously think about it, but if they're trying to build a project and like, oh, well, that's POS het for blood, I don't want bloods, or I don't want aneries or whatever, then they'll kind of like either literally cut that out of their search on Morph Market, or in their head, they're like, oh, I'm not buying that. It's POS het anery. I don't work with anery. Wouldn't really, that could be negative for it, or even if it does have it, they could just not use it. But anyway, in the end, what he's saying is, for him, it helped him sell animals faster to not have the POS there. So the ones that did prove out, he's able to charge more money for and set the expectations for the customer, and they know they're buying a het, and they don't have to wonder, and am I going to raise this girl up for 3 years and maybe she doesn't prove out? But on the other side, it's good too, because if it was a POS het for something and it tests negative, he just doesn't even mention that in the ad, and those people don't have any of those hangups of, oh, it's POS het for this and I don't work with that or whatever. So the ones that do prove out to be het, he can sell for more money and they sell faster than a POS het. And the ones that test negative, he can sell faster because he just doesn't even worry about it, and he's happy to sell it at a lower price because he knows. And then once again, like from a customer service standpoint, it's always going to be better to be able to sell things to your customers where their expectations are set properly. And so if you're not having to sell posets, at least for higher, for lower end animals, that probably doesn't make too big of a difference. But for a higher end animal that's a posset, if you can eliminate those posets and sell them already tested, that's going to be a lot better for you and your relationship with your customers in the long term. The other really big thing is it does make it where you can get to your projects, like your end goals, your double and triple recessive with, some incomplete dominance. You can get there a lot faster. And so that kind of makes it more fun and exciting. We all have to kind of learn to be patient in this game, but that does kind of take some of that off. And then the other point that we hear all the time was what you said earlier, Stefan, was that you can have you can either produce the same amount of animals and get a higher percent of what you're shooting for, or you can have your collection be smaller and still produce the same amount of animals that are your target animals. It essentially makes it more efficient. So you can either downsize your collection or you can keep it the same size, but then you'd be able to produce a higher percent of your target, combos, things like that. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've been initially when personally I hate posets. But I know some people that are like, yeah, they are super exciting because like when they prove out, you're like so happy. Yeah, but when they don't prove out, you're like, okay, I wasted 4 or 5 years. Super funny.
Yeah. And that's even more the case with boas than with ball pythons because you got to wait longer.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a longer wait and definitely adds up to a lot of years, like doing a lot of posets. I understand that people that made like good deals on buying posets where they proved, they are like super happy. And in one way I can feel like it's a bit negative to take away the possibilities on like some of the high-end products for people to get in at a lower price point, because like the posets, like even if it adds slight value, it's not like huge compared to if it would prove to be het, if we're starting to look like at triple or quadruple recessive projects where it might be like visual for 2 and possible het for 1. But I do think like future-wise, in boas, I've not only like the shed test, I also think like on the health parts with like reptile rhinovirus and stuff like that, we are, let's say in 10 years, I think we're going to see like the direction where you have like the super high premium stuff where they are health tested and shed tested, that this is guaranteed that. So you don't end up like you have a visual sharp that is het call. That's not going to happen anymore. Like then you actually get to like the premium standpoint, and then you're going to have like a whole bunch of people that don't do tests on either like health or sheds. That's where I think it's going to go. And like for the people that aims more for the premium, for sure, like some of the byproducts you produce when like on newer products doesn't make sense and could still be like wholesaled to reptile stores and stuff like that. But that we actually had a question about like average test costs. How much?
Before we move to that, can I just insert one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're saying one sad part of the poshets going away, or at least being decreased, is that gave somebody a chance to come into a project at a lower price and maybe get lucky. So another aspect that people have pointed out to us with ball pythons is you still have that same opportunity to come in at a lower price. And the way you do it is like what you just said, Stefan, you hate the poshets. I also hated poshets. So I tried to always have homozygous on one side or the other so I didn't have to worry about poshets. Well, with the genetic testing, instead of buying an animal that's like a double homozygous, or something like that, like say you wanted to work on the habaneros, so that's VPI and Leopard, but you don't have the money to buy a VPI Leopard or to have it homozygous on both sides, for both on one side or the other.
Yeah.
Now you have the chance, you could buy a double het male and do the testing. And so for a lower price, you can get into that project and you can still produce. So say if you're buying a double recessive male versus a double het male, that price difference is significant. But with that
huge
double recessive male, you're just going to make double hets, VPI Leopard double hets, and you're not going to necessarily keep that whole litter. But now that you can test, you can use a double het male, breed that, and then test, and then just keep the ones that are double hets. And so you can do it at a much lower price and still get the holdbacks that you wanted. So that is another way that the testing kind of replaces that paying for a lower price for possets and having a chance to hit. You can still do that same thing, just using het or double or triple het males that you maybe wouldn't have, because then in the past you would have had a litter full of pos double hets and you would have no idea which ones are the ones. Well, now you can test them and know.
Yeah, I definitely like from the ones that are a bit bigger and like maybe is more doing the newer projects. Like for instance, I know like that's almost going back like a decade now, but like for the Labyrinth Red Dragons, like that was produced with the Labyrinth bred to an albino motley het blood, so like the whole litter was het blood. Now it was a lucky project where like all the females that were bred initially proved out to be the ones that were het blood, but we still have a bunch of males sitting that is never used, so they aren't proven. So maybe it's time to like, as soon as the blood tests, the shed tests for blood is ready, to test them and see if they are het red dragons or just het albinos, and then maybe make someone happy with the breeder ready male.
Yep.
They would probably like to have a girlfriend, those boys.
Yes, and that gives you the chance as a breeder to kind of move some of that inventory that for you, where you're further on in that project, isn't valuable, but to someone who's newer, they would love that.
Definitely. The only thing I feel like is definitely like on the more like low value, like, and now I'm talking maybe up to like 1K even. Like, what's the cost of the shed test, like for a single gene?
So right now, so US dollars, I believe they're listed at $40 US dollars for a single morph test. Right now, if you buy it through Morph Market, you automatically get 15% off, and it doesn't matter what test it is. And for people that are really new breeders, we do have sex determination tests also, which the Boa one we will have here before too long. And that's not as expensive. That's more like a $25 test for the species we have so far anyway. Some species, it may be more complicated and more expensive in the future, but so for a single morph test, I believe the list price is $40, and then to add a second one, I believe is $20, and then after that, I think it's like $10. So if you're using the same shed and DNA to do multiple tests, then we can do it cheaper, because obviously that one extraction, we can run 3 tests on it a lot cheaper than having to do 3 different extractions for 3 different tests. So yeah, those additional tests on the same shed are cheaper. And then each fall we have, or each spring, I mean, we have had a 25% off sale. So unfortunately that just ended. It was for the month of April. So yeah, I think that right now, if you did it through Morph Market, you would get the test for like $34 for a single test.
Yes. Then it definitely like just doing quick the business calculation in my head. As long as it's an animal that would be like 500 plus, it actually would make sense to do the test.
Yeah.
What do you say, Nate? How does like the shed test in Boa change your plans, like your ideas for the future?
Yeah, it changed a whole lot for us. And that kind of isn't necessarily due to the shed testing, but the results that it provided. So you have to kind of look at shed testing as this overarching system that allows you to get a lot better answers, know a lot more better what you're dealing with. And with that information, we were allowed to go through and do basically everything you were talking about. We experienced in like 1 week. We had animals that we had been growing up for a really long time, females and males. You know, we have some, I think, like 5 or 6 year old female hypos that we were trying to grow up. They were possible NFI. And the one that produced them was a het, what we thought was an NFI het albino. Now it turns out it's a het JPC to a sunglow. So in order to be an albino, they would have had to pick up that JPC allele from the mother, which means they would be an NFI because they've got 1 copy JPC and 1 copy call. So that allowed us to basically go through any animal that we have that was produced by a het JPC. And if it was an albino, boom, marked as an NFI. If it was not an albino, boom, marked as a het call. And so now we have like probably 10 females and males that have quite a bit of size on them that we can just move out because they're hypo het albinos, and we were growing them up as possible NFIs. And then what it also did was it allowed every snake that was in that litter that was an albino, instead of having to breed them and prove them out, we know they're sunglows. Like all these ones here, this one in this cage down here, the one right next to it down on the bottom here, these are both sunglows produced in the same way that I just talked about. They both look completely different. And one of them is proven. The other one we hadn't had proven. So we were thinking, oh, this one's not going to be an NFI. But it turns out that because they were produced by het JPCs, they have to be NFIs. So we didn't actually have to breed this one to find out. So it saves a lot of time like that. And that's one big thing. But it does really help from the baby perspective too. Because like the litter that we had where it was the het JPC to the het JPC, we have 24 of these guys here who are stripe babies like that. And we have no idea which ones are het JPC and which ones aren't. So, and like you were saying, you know, that right there is almost a prime example of where shed testing every single one of those makes sense, because either it's going to prove out to be het JPC, and that's a quite high value project, or it's going to prove out to be a normal, and that's a maybe $100 snake. So to be able to spend $34 and then increase the price of your snake from like $100 to like $1,500 in one go without having to grow it up, without having to breed it, unless you know what to hold back, that's a very powerful thing, especially for new projects like this. And it also is going to allow us to find those new projects a lot easier. Like the one that we are talking a lot about recently in the group was the Kraken stuff. Is that polygenic? Is that incomplete dominant? We don't know, but it can throw it either way. And once we have answers, it allows you to make much better breeding decisions going forwards, market them better, and be able to provide guaranteed answers to your customers, which is really nice. When it comes to the POS het thing that you were talking about, I definitely agree that it's really cool to be able to use like het animals and use them kind of as if they were a visual. You could take a het sharp blood and breed that to a double het Anery Leopard and then just shed test all of them and find out which one's got whichever, genes you want them to have, whichever mutations they want you to have. Let's say I wanted to start a line that didn't have Anery. Well, I'll just take the sharp blood leopard ones and hold those back. Let's say I want ones that are Anery blood leopard. Well, I'll just keep those ones. So you can do so much more with animals that in the past were not that top quality animal. It's a really powerful thing, but it's all about being able to provide the sheds and the information to get to that point to where we can have access to these tools.
Yes. We got the question, like how long does it usually, like if someone sends in the sheds, if we're talking like available test, like say Aztec, how long does it take for them to get an answer?
So the first variable is, the post office getting it. So if you're in the United States and you send it to us, it would go to our Texas address. So the farther you are from Texas, it might take a little longer. But once it actually gets to us in Texas, then we usually have your results within 24 to 48 business hours. So if we got it on a Wednesday, you usually get your results either Thursday or Friday. If we get it on a Friday, you probably get results Monday or Tuesday.
That's quite quick, I'd say.
Yes. And for those of you that are, in the EU, we have it set up now for the ball python where it's pretty similar to that. So Morphs, Teresa Morphs, she has RepGen. That's the name of the company that is running so far it's just been ball python, but in the next, I think probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we should be sending her all BOA tests that we have and hognose as well. So she'll be able to run some of those. So then that should be a similar thing. Once Teresa has it at her place, then it would be in most cases, 1 to 2 business days, unless she happens to be out of the lab for a day or 2 or something like that.
That's really sweet. Do they already have the possibility to test the BOA test sheds in Europe?
She has everything set up so that she can. She just does not have the actual test, like the materials there yet. But I'll be sending that to her in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So yeah, I would imagine anyone that's already sent them some or will after this podcast, or I guess what do you refer to this? It's not really a podcast.
Oh yeah, we usually we call them live sessions. This is an added extra live session this month. Usually we have one at the end of the month with different topics. So this is an add-on, but then later also going to be published on YouTube.
So yeah, after this live session, if you sent them in within the next week or 2, then yeah, as soon as she gets those materials there, then it should be within a day or 2 of her getting those materials. She'll have it, and then from then on, anytime you send stuff in, she should be able to do it in 1, 2, and since it's just her all by herself, I maybe say more like 2 to 3 business days, just to give her a little wiggle room, since she's the only one running the show there so far.
Yeah, but still super quick, I'd say. I would definitely expect at least a week. So that's definitely possible.
So with the panels that we do for ball pythons, it's different because we're giving back 50 results. And so those do take more like a month, 3 to 4, or sometimes even 5 weeks. But yeah, anything that's just like a single, or if you're getting 2 or 3 different mutations tested, it's fast. We've optimized that. That seemed to be the most helpful for people. A lot of the time, people, as they're about to go to a show, they'll send it in and they want the results by Thursday or Friday when they're packing for the show. And so those fast results are really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So an interesting question for both of you that we could discuss. I definitely feel that we see it more and more, that people are stacking genes together. And I think with the add-on now, with the possibility to actually then later test, this will become more frequent. So the question is actually, do you think genetic testing will ever replace visual evaluation and breeder judgment? So it's a question both for Ben and Nate.
I'll let you go first, Nate. What do you think?
Yeah, I have extremely strong opinions about this. So I think that it's going to be a combination of both. And I think that it comes down to the breeding choices you make. Me personally, and for us, I feel like a lot of the projects we work on, we kind of pick a direction and we look at each mutation as kind of a color in a painter's palette, I guess I've heard people say, right? And I could say I want to make a snake that looks like this, and then I think, what do I have to do to get to that? So it's not about let me just stack as much into one animal as I can and then find out what it is later. I'm shooting for a specific plan. And because of that, the visual ID is typically pretty good because I know what to expect. And then, unless you're dealing with a lot of mutations in there, for the most part, you can pretty well pick out what they are. And boas, it's not like we have hundreds of mutations similar to ball pythons. With boas, It's like if it comes out white, it's like almost everything we work with is albino. So if it comes out white, well, then it's also an Anery. And then you just look at the pattern and you can pretty much decipher relatively easily. So for a long time, I thought that the visual ID was really going to be the most important. But like a litter I can show you right here. And this is also something I saw people saying, why would you shed test for certain mutations where it's super easy to look at it? Like Motley or Aztec, why would you need a shed test for that? Well, I thought the same thing, and I was thinking the same thing, to be honest, about like IMG, because if it turns black, it's an IMG. Like it'll be darker, you can tell. But then we had this litter with the JPC albino and IMG in there, and it's like I can't tell which ones of these are IMGs. I can't tell which ones are pure JPC albinos, and then some of them are likely to be both, and I don't know. Like this one here. Like, I'm not going to be able to, I can't flip the camera around without leaving, but like there's just too much variation in here for me to decipher what all of this is. But the shed testing, I can make relatively decent visual IDs on some of them, but then the shed testing will clear up the answers for sure. And so, like I was going to say, I'll take back what I was saying about, why would you need a shed test for IMG? We definitely do. So hopefully that gets done soon so we can get some answers on what that litter is, because I don't know which ones of those are JPCs and which ones are NFI IMGs and which ones are, it looks like there's probably 2 or 3 in there that are possibly JPC IMGs, like their tails are turning white. So I really, it's going to be a lot of looking, and then it's a mixture of both. I think that's what it is. It's visual ID is very helpful, but the shed testing is going to be great to confirm things. And even in one litter, you're going to have some animals where you know what it is right off the bat, and you're going to have some where you're like, well, I have to get this one shed tested, especially with stuff like this. If you pair a Het JPC to a Het JPC, if it comes out albino, there's no point shed testing that animal because you know what it is. But if it doesn't, well, there's definitely a point in shed testing those animals. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Yes, an interesting part, just like to see. I know when we looked at like the NFI stuff, like a few months ago back, you have like quite a lot of like difference in coloration, where like both what I think is today is the like one copy JPC and one copy call, so the NFIs, where you have more of like the greenish stuff and more of like the orange pinkish stuff, that then becomes polygenic stuff, I would guess.
Yeah, I also think it's a lot due to the Anery. Like a lot of the ones that we have that are Het for Anery have a lot of greens popping through in them, and definitely some more than others. Like this snake here, I'm pretty sure I showed on the on when we were on last time. I don't know where the camera is, but this snake here has a good amount of greens on it. Where is the camera on this? Is it up top?
You have
okay,
it.
it's up top there. There we go.
Now you got
there's
screen also.
There's quite a lot of greens in this snake, and that's 100% Het Anery. And there is definitely natural variation in there, like polygenic stuff, because this is a brother who's also an NFI 100% Het Anery, and he is significantly less green. Now it's still some in there, but he's significantly less green. And then the sister looks like the first one I showed you, where she's totally crazy looking. Like, here she is. She's insane looking. Whoa, almost dropped it on her. So, yeah, she's got a lot of greens and pinks in her. And then that even goes for what we've seen with the IMGs, because these guys here, the ones that I showed off that are like this, the IMG NFI, this is possible Het Anery. So we want to find out whether that one is Anery, because the brother to her looks exactly like that. But there are littermates who have a look that is different than anything else. It's different than the NFI, and it's different than an IMG. So I think it might be both, but they don't have the greens like that. So I think the greens like that, and that's this guy, he doesn't really look like an IMG albino. He doesn't really look like an NFI albino. I think he could be both and just didn't get the Anery. So we're trying to, through the shed testing, we hope to get some answers on that. But that's why I think that when you look at the litter I just showed you, it doesn't look like there's a lot of greens in there, because I think that the male who produced that one was an IMG NFI. He's actually kind of green. So it's possible that he proved out, but because the mother didn't, those babies don't have like the greens coming through. That's something we're still having to play around with a lot, but it definitely, like, even, we proved out a male. The litter we had this year that produced where are they at? Anery Het JPCs. Yeah, they're up top here. We had a litter that produced an Anery Het JPC stuff. That litter was produced by a male who was an NFI, who, by looking at him, we were like, he looks kind of green. He could be Het for Anery. So we bred him to an Anery, and he proved out. So I definitely think there's some correlation there with the green and the Anery, because we can even look at them and be like, that one looks like it's going to be Het Anery, having no idea that there was any Anery in the, like, there's Anery running through the whole NFI thing, because one of the females that produced a lot of the stuff that has, now we're so many generations in. So basically, like, one of the matriarchs that started all of this was unknowingly Het for Anery, which is why a lot of this is Het for Anery. But because of that, we just kind of assume anything could be Het for Anery, but we don't guarantee, oh, one of these parents was Het Anery, one of them wasn't. But we just looked at that male and we're like, he's kind of green, he could be Het Anery. And then we bred him and he was. So now that allows us to kind of look at other stuff, and instead of breeding it, let's say it's young, we can shed test it for Anery. So there's so much you can do with that. But I definitely think that the Anery is playing a role in the green coloration there, and that's why this litter doesn't have it as much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So over to Ben. What's your view of the whole question?
So oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, this is a JPC motley, but it's like, I don't know whether this one I don't think has IMG in it, but we can't tell with any of this stuff. It's kind of difficult.
Yeah. So in my mind, what I've seen with ball python, a lot of it we've learned as ball python breeders have used the testing and have adjusted, the way they choose holdbacks and their size and all these different things. I think that if you look at the time span as a keeper, if say you're starting now and you're brand new, you would likely use the results from the genetic testing. You would kind of rely on that more than like 5 or 10 years from now, as you get experience having babies born, and I almost said hatched out, but we're talking about boas now. So yeah, you produce more babies and you see more of it. So, someone 10 years from now or someone that's already been breeding for 10 or 20 years and just starts doing the genetic testing, they may not rely on it as much as someone who's brand new to breeding and is doing the testing. But over time, I think a lot like what Nate was saying, I think that the entire time, if you have access to the testing, you can use both. And it may help you a lot when you're young and new to breeding. And over time, your eye will get to where you can pick those things out. You can tell things apart, different combinations, things like that. So that's kind of like a general trend, I think, that would happen. There's a use for it all along the way, but as you're newer, I can help you learn what certain combinations look like and how to tell babies apart, which ones have something and which ones don't. But the other aspect to it that we see from ball pythons is the breeders like Justin Kabelka, that, like I said, we've been working with since the beginning. And he has a very, very good eye for ball python morphs. But yeah, I think he would tell you, if you asked him, there are still some surprises. So he tests, I think I won't put words in his mouth, but I would imagine he tests the vast majority of his, kind of medium to higher dollar animals, even if there are things that, there are things that are clearly a clown, but we'll still see that he has that be tested to make sure, and he has that kind of as a validated, verified thing that it is homozygous for clown. But yeah, there still are surprises sometimes for him that, something will come through and he'll shoot me a text and be like, hey, animal such and such just did this, tested as this. Can you rerun that and make sure? And sometimes we'll find out, a year later, 2 years later, yeah, it really does have that, or no, it didn't. He had something pop up. He had a clutch where he had some all-white and a couple all-white animals, and he's like, I don't have any like leucistic kind of thing going on in this, black-eyed or blue-eyed leucistic stuff going on. Why do I have these? And so we did a blue-eyed Lucy panel. There's like 6 or 7 different morphs in ball pythons that can give you leucistics, these blue-eyed leucistics. And we found out, they're super phantoms. So then he looked back and he saw at one point he was breeding for something, and he did breed 2 siblings. So he kept them back because they were the nicest looking ones. Well, now we know he kept them back because they were ones that both had phantom. And that one breeding he did with the siblings, he ended up, and that's this one where he ended up with these all white animals. So anyway, yeah. So he found out that now he could look back at previous clutches from those 2 different kind of lines where the phantom came from, and they're like, oh, well, that one's a phantom, that one's not, and so even with a lot of experience, there will be maybe fewer and far between surprises, but still some things that will pop up that will help you realize exactly what you got and can change your breeding decisions. But the other thing that we learned is, as you're always pushing the envelope and trying to produce new things, that means that you may not know, kind of like what Nate was just saying, how IMG and Motley how they're gonna look when you do it in a combo that no one's ever made. So if you're at the forefront producing combos no one else has made, that's another time where, maybe Aztec is easy to pick out to this point, but maybe once you combine it with this or that or something else, it's not, And so that's the other part where I think even an experienced keeper and breeder can still benefit and find some information that will have a significant impact on breeding decisions.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like, for instance, like if we take Aztec now, for example, that is in general super easy to distinguish, like when combined. But when they are combined with Leopard, and this might be due to, like, Leopard is probably the most variable, like they can look. However, they are 2 sisters, like VPI leopards. One is 100% that this is an Aztec. The other one is like, yeah, it's probably an Aztec, but it's definitely not something where it's like, yeah, this is clear. So that would definitely like make sense to do tests on. If you would plan to do something with a male that actually is Aztec, due to like the super Aztec isn't a very nice combination to make due to like the neurological issues you get with them. And I can definitely, like, in some combinations, I know where, like, when you add Motley, it can be difficult. Like, otherwise, like, Motley is something where you're like, yeah, that will be super easy to pick out. But in some combos, it can actually be difficult. We actually had one animal where we had a huge discussion where, like, you look at one picture and you see, like, yeah, you have this, like, yeah, it's probably Motley, but nothing else adds up that it should be Motley. And then they post another picture and you're like, no, it's no Motley. And then next one. So yeah, then it's definitely nice to be able, especially like on the incomplete stuff that actually isn't a good thing to produce the supers of. And then it's like super nice. And I do think, like, on the higher end stuff, like I mentioned previously, I think like in 10 years that you actually have like a validated pedigree, like you can still, like, okay, this is what produced it and this is what the animal carries. At least if we're starting to talk like the really high premium stuff, even if boas, like high premium boas, are still cheap compared to ball pythons, but they also take a lot longer, and that's most likely the case.
Yeah.
So that's.
So did we lose Nate? Oh, there we go.
No, we have Nate. He just took over.
Sorry,
so
I got a
put him
snake.
off.
I got a snake that I'm wrestling with right here. My bad. I gotta ask someone else to deal with this right now. I'll be back in half a sec.
So let's see. So this is actually like quite interesting to see, like, ball python, like the morphs, has definitely been around longer than boas, and like seen to the amount of morphs or single gene mutations that are found. Where do you see, if you would just guess, like 10 years from now, boas, how much more single gene mutations do you think there is to find? Now everyone will like just go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest sources is imported animals, and for a long time, it's less now, but for a long time, we had like tens of thousands, if not more than that, of wild caught ball pythons coming in as wild, wild hatched or whatever. I don't have a good feel for how much importing. Is there a lot of importing coming for boas, or is that slowed down or
it's definitely slowed down and seen to like there are. I know that like for instance like Mexico is like super difficult now, and yeah, that's a whole other story with one of the projects where like you earlier talked about fake hets. Like the whole Boa Pied project from Mexico, where they actually sold fake hets for quite a lot of money. But now, to my understanding, it's like almost impossible for them to get the CITES to do the export legally into the US. And like it's the same, like going back, looking at superfires, like came from Brazil. We actually have quite a lot of requests from Brazil, but they can't import either. So it's not possible. But we have one guy that always sends, and it's quite interesting. I think it was last year where they actually found like the leucistic superfire in the wild in Brazil. So they still exists. But I definitely think they probably are bringing in some wild, but I definitely think it's become more and more difficult. And like looking at Europe, it's definitely like what people did on the side before doesn't work anymore. Like how they have increased how they checked like the paperwork and stuff like that. So, and I think like we have had a discussion in the community on Boa University also about like looking at the pieds, where there's definitely is people in the States that say they are working the pied projects. The problem is when they are producing them, then maybe the authorities will wonder, where does this come from? So I think it's more difficult to get more of the new stuff.
Yeah. So when it comes to like random mutations popping up that affect color and pattern, obviously the more numbers you have to pull from, the more likely you're going to have that happen. So if we're not able to import a lot, we can't use the wild population as part of our numbers. So it sounds like the vast majority of new mutations would likely have to come from captive breeding, and there's not as many animals if we narrow it down to just captive bred. So it'll probably be difficult to grow in significant numbers, I would imagine, over time. Just like we saw with JPC albino, that definitely, like, all signs point to that being a random mutation that happened in a captive situation. So the fact that they had one litter that had one albino in it and then a second litter that had 0, I think he said it was like 68 or 69 babies, and only one of them was an albino. That's like, I did the math on the phone with Nate the other day. I think it was 1 times 10 to the minus like 50, or I don't know. It was some ridiculously small number. Or maybe it was like 1 in 50 million, or there's some reason I'm thinking of 50, but anyway. I mean, it can happen. It just likely won't happen super often. But it will be nice that we have a database building. And so, 5 years from now, if you have something pop up in your collection and it looks a little weird, you can send it to us. And if we have, tens of thousands of boas that have gone through that, then we can look at the various color and pattern genes, and we can say, for gene blah blah blah, we can see there is a mutation there that would cause a change in the protein, and so yeah, that could be real, and we could be like, hey, as you breed these, this is a marker. This could be what's causing that look. So the next time you get a litter, when you breed this one, send them in, and the ones that have that phenotype, that look, if they match up with this marker, then we would be able to know kind of more in real time what a new morph, the mutation that goes with it, and have a test for it. Whereas right now we just don't have that database to be able to compare to. So we have to have lots of sheds come in so we have enough sequence to find it. But yeah, 5 or 10 years from now, I think we can do it more in real time.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. A question about that. We actually have one project where we're trying to figure out what it is. Like initially we've been that definitely is polygenic, most likely. Where last season when we bred and like looking at the outcomes, it's looking more and more that it would be a single gene stuff. The question is like, there's not a lot of them that would be the homozygous form of it. But is it beneficial to send like both the ones that we would believe would be homozygous and the ones that are heterozygous?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Because we're because this year we're through breeding also trying to figure it out. We're actually breeding it to a few other stuff to see what pops out, like what it actually looks. So then it would be a lot of heterozygous if it would be a single gene incomplete, for instance.
Yeah, those definitely still help. If we have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that are homozygous and a dozen that are hets, that's getting close to 20. Obviously, the more that are homozygous, that ratio, if it's more homozygous than heterozygous, then we're more likely to find it. But yeah, that's still worth trying, or at least collecting them, and then maybe the next litter you get, that would push us over the edge.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the products that we plan to send in for research for to see.
And another thing, I would throw in real quick for people, for ball python breeders, they've been thinking about this for 2 or 3 years. For boa people, it's a little newer. The other really cool thing is you can essentially keep your sheds on file at your place. So something like that, say you have 3 or 4 or 5 animals, and you collect those sheds, the biggest problem that will destroy the sheds is water, moisture, humidity. So if you collect those sheds as soon as you can and then completely dry them out and save a piece like the size of a square inch, a silver dollar, I guess that's like what, 2 or 3 centimeters squared. If you do that and you save it dried in a Ziploc bag. I have some that I've had in my basement for, it's probably coming up on 7.5. It's definitely over 7 years, and those still run for me just fine. So that's another thing to kind of have in your mind, like, even if I don't have something worth testing right now, there are people I know, ball python breeders, that are, when they have a clutch hatch out, 10 days later, they have that first shed, they're just banking those back. And then it's also for their customers. It can be like, hey, I sold you this, POS het monsoon. They have a monsoon test now. I still have that shed. If you want me to send it in for you, they'll have the customer pay for it, but that customer doesn't have to wait for a shed because that breeder kept it and is like, yeah, I already have it on file. I'll send it in for you if you want. So that's another cool thing, is we're really lucky that we can get a DNA sample from something that's completely non-invasive, and it also stores really well.
That's sweet. That proves how difficult it is to destroy DNA also. When you can see,
as long as you can keep it away from the wetness, yes.
Yeah. I actually have a question due to like we keep all our babies like separated in rack systems. Otherwise, we usually use a lot bigger enclosures, and even looking at a lot of our holdbacks like subadults, we do have multiple animals. so they are like cohabbed. So the question is like, I know you talked about this on then a previous episode on your channel, like the contamination from each other. Like, how crucial is it? Like, how many days do they need to be apart to be on the safe side?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what we've actually tested. So it won't answer all the questions, but so we'll give you a really good feel for what you probably would want to implement if you are cohabbing. So in garter snakes, it's very common to keep them, garter snake keepers and breeders keep them in groups. And what we found was in garter snakes, one marker that's on the male chromosome, that's like, you know, in humans, the female has two X's and the male is XY. In garter snakes, it's the other way around. The male has a ZW and the female has two Z's. So anyway, what we found was when we do that sex determination test on a group of garter snakes, they would all test as being male, because we assume the only reason we would see a W chromosome marker is if it's a male. And if all we see is the Z chromosome, then we would assume it's a female. And since they were cohabbing all the time, and it's a fairly high humidity, they're kind of, you know, they're all over each other and stuff. They're very active. They're moving all the time. So that's when we decided, we, you know, pointed out to ball python breeders also, you know, watch out for this. And if you're going to send the first shed, because a lot of people would let them hatch out and then stay in their incubator together until their first shed. And so we said, you know, you don't want to do that. So what we did is we tested specifically, we had 3 days in between when the animal was separated and then when it shed. So it's essentially like once their eyes started to go like into blue, so, you know, they're, you know, 2, 3, 4 days away from shedding. And we were able to show that 2 to 3 or 4 day period was enough that we saw absolutely no cross-contamination whatsoever. So if you have like subadults that are cohabbed and you want to do genetic test on them, all I would imagine should work just fine is to have just that 2 or 3 day period. So if you see their eyes starting to go blue, just separate them and maybe even put them both into a temporary container that hasn't had another animal in there. And if you have cleaned that container with bleach, I mean, you're definitely getting rid of any DNA that could have been in there. You put them into 2 things that were cleaned really well and had no other animal in them, wait the 3 days for them to shed and send it. The other thing you could do is just separate them at any time for 2 or 3 days and then do the belly scale clips. So we have really, it's just like a 1-minute video on our YouTube channel that shows where you're just flipping the boa over and the really large, long ventral scales using scissors, like for python breeders, I say like the ones we use to slit eggs, but since you're boa breeders, you probably don't have pipping eggs or pipping scissors. But yeah, just small scissors, and you just shave the edge of that scale. It's clear, and I don't think that they even feel it. They don't like you flipping them over, but if you just get the clear part of it, then, and it will look like an eyelash. It's just a thin sliver. If you do like 2 or 3 of those, put them in a Ziploc and then just write on there, just say scale clips. That way we'll know to look for the little scale clips. We don't think it's an empty bag. But those work really well for if it's like a subadult or an adult and you don't want to wait 6 months for it to shed again, you can do those scale clips.
Yeah, that's quite sweet. There's the possibility. Let's see. I think we have Nate. Are you awake, Nate?
Yeah, I'm awake. I'm back. I'm here. I enjoyed that. That was definitely interesting to know. Yeah, about having to keep them separate so there's no cross contamination there. That's very good to know.
Yeah, and we have not ever had that problem with a ball python, or obviously, you know, since we've been doing boa testing very little, but that potential is there if they're like actively together. The only time we did have a problem was with a ball python. shed came in to be tested for Het pied, I believe it was, and it was a clown animal that was pos Het pied, but it tested as being homozygous pied, even though it clearly wasn't visually. Well, what happened was the person had just taken a piece of shed out of the bin that had just been in there for a while, and she had put a male in that was homozygous pied. So it wasn't actually the shed of the animal in the bin. It was an old shed that was from the male that was breeding it. So it took us, testing and retest, because we're worried, we're always worried. We want to make sure we're giving the correct results. We're like, how could this happen? What's wrong? Like, we're doing all this stuff, but eventually we figured out, oh yeah, I mean, if you just pull a piece of shed out of the container, the cage, bin, whatever, and it's not from the animal that you're testing, then it's not going to give you the right results.
Yeah. It's definitely probably need to have some sort of clue where stuff is from. The same as you should probably know where your animal comes from, like keep in inventory list where you have a clue.
We were super cautious to not pull sheds from cages where there was a male in there breeding, because we didn't know whether the shed was from the male or the female. We didn't want to make any risk. And we also were thinking, even if it is the female shed, maybe if the male crawled all over it or something, we just didn't want to risk it in that regard either. So so we didn't pull any sheds from like females cages like that. We waited till they were separate and then shed again, and that's what we did. And then like, this is something that I guess if people are going to be pulling sheds, this is the way we've done it, which has worked really well for us, is when we pull a shed from a snake and we're going to send it off, we put a purple circle on there. And so that allows us, so it has a purple circle. So that tells us we pulled a shed. And now, because we're only testing for JPC albino, really, we're just looking for, is it positive for JPC? Is it negative? Is it a homozygote? Is it a heterozygote or not carrier at all? So we rate we put the purple on when we pull the shed. And then when we get a result, if it's homozygous, we'll put plus. And then if it's a heterozygote, we'll put like plus negative. And then if it's not carrying it at all, we'll put 2 minuses. And that's how we do it, so that we're not pulling the same shed from an animal twice, basically.
Yeah. It's good to have a system in place.
Yeah, for everything. It just makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
And the way I did it was I got a bag, a Ziploc, and I marked it with the animal ID, and I just put it right next to its cage or container, whatever you have them in. So it was always sitting there, and as soon as they shed, then I'd put the shed in there and take it away and go dry the shed out and run it. But that way I would know ones that I want to collect from or ones that have a bag right there. And then once it's been collected, that bag's gone. And so I'm not like looking to see, oh, have they shed today? So that works too.
Yeah, that's a good way. Yeah.
Sweet. An interesting question is, I'm not sure how common it is in ball pythons, but like in boas, we can definitely see it quite a lot, and you can definitely see some lines throw more of it, and that's paradoxing. I know I've spoken to Matt about some ball python that he has that it's actually what you would probably call like a true chimera, that it tests for one gene on one side and something on the other side. But like, that's an extreme case, I would say. In general, otherwise, like, do you have any clue, like the paradoxing? What causes it?
Yeah, so from the causing and genetics side, that's one thing. And then also how they test when you do genetic tests, that's another thing. So make sure I hit all of those things. So what it seems like is you could kind of think of paradoxing in general in at least in snakes. I haven't really paid attention in other reptiles, but in snakes, it seems like one of two different things are going on. Whatever is genetically controlling it, it could be like a polygenic kind of thing, or it could also be there are traits that are genetically controlled, but they have variable penetrance. So it's not like if you have that mutation, you always have this look or this phenotype. It could be if you're heterozygous for it, then you're more prone and given like environmental conditions, like when the embryo is forming in either the mother, I guess with boas it would be in the mother because there's no eggs laid. So, but yeah, it could be during in utero during development. That there's something environmental that will push it the rest of the way. So it's like it has the marker there, so it can happen. But sometimes, given the environment, could be as simple as temperature or humidity or whatever, or like the females choosing to sit on the heat all the time or choosing to sit off. It could be something like that. You first of all have to have that genetic marker there to even have a chance, but you also have to have an environmental thing happen to kick it off. That's possible. But what it boils down to is it does seem like some lines, and some morphs are more prone to producing paradox animals. And so I would tell you the way to think about it is you essentially have like a predisposition to potentially be paradox, but it's not as simple as like, is it heterozygous or homozygous? And then you're going to get that result. There's some other part to it, whether it's other genes that also have to be a certain way, or if it's environmental conditions that have to be a certain way. But it's more complicated than, is it albino or not? There's some other things that have to happen. And then from the testing side, that specific animal you're talking about that Matt had us test. So it's split, straight down the whole body, like perfectly in the middle. And one side looked like a desert ghost and the other side didn't. And when we tested them, one was homozygous for DG and the other was negative, just like you would pick, from visually. But we've also had instances where we have one video, we have an animal, the breeder it was already kind of a juvenile sized animal. And so that shed came off all in one piece, and he took a Sharpie and he marked off, I think it was 13 different regions. So he had 2 different recessive traits, or it might have even been 3, but it was definitely at least 2 different recessive traits where that animal could be visual, or it could be het, or it could be negative. And so with those 13 different patches, we tested all of them, and we know visually this one looks like a pied, this one looks like a sunset, this one looks like neither, So we had that information, and the genetic testing in that case did not match up perfectly with what you're seeing visually. So what I always want to make sure people understand, if they have some kind of paradox in the animal, even if it's just like a little tiny spot on it that's paradox, the rest of the animal visually looks a certain way. It does not mean it's going to test that way. It also does not mean it's going to breed that way. So if it's paradox at all, so say it's has a little tiny spot of albino there, but the rest of it looks like normal, it doesn't mean that you can reliably say from a genetic test from the skin somewhere on the animal, even if you try to get that very spot where the albino patch is, it's not going to necessarily tell you how that animal is going to breed. The only cells that would tell you that would be the actual sperm cells that, or the cells that produce the sperm, or the cells that are producing the eggs, or the eggs themselves. And so we can't tell you, if you have a paradox and you send it in, we can't tell you, okay, this is how it's going to breed. We just can't guarantee that. So always keep that in mind. Even if there's only a little paradox there, it may throw off how the testing will come out versus what it looks like visually, and versus how it will breed. So it definitely makes genetic testing less reliable for paradox animals.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We actually had a good friend, he's also a member of Boa University from the Netherlands, that got one. We have always called her the weirdo, and it's been like, it's either a VPI snow or it's an Anery het VPI. That he then later got, like, never came to mind that it would be a ghost, but when she bred, it proved that she's a ghost. So that would actually be quite interesting to see. It's like, no, it's not Hypo, but yeah. So it would be quite interesting for him to send in a test later on when you have Hypo already also to see.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely sometimes it's quite interesting what things look like. A lot of times you just have like the small blotches, but sometimes you have some animals where you're like scratching your head like this doesn't look right.
Yep. Yeah, paradoxes are fun. They're kind of one in a million. You can't make another one just like it. They're fun, but they're also a little more unpredictable. So
Yeah, definitely a lot more. Yeah, go Nate.
That chimera that is half and half, is that, has that been bred or not yet?
I would imagine, I'm pretty sure it was a male. I can't imagine Matt would breed it himself. He may have sold or have it get bred by someone else's female, but
he just replied, he is an adult. I hadn't bred him yet.
He does still have him. He's so cool looking.
We have one that's exactly like that, and we've bred it, but it produces it's a champagne paradox, but half the animal looks champagne, half of it looks normal, and it produces champagnes. So, but I'd be curious on if, I would wonder if like one hemipene would produce one and then the other would produce the other, and then it depends on which hemipene got the job done. Like, I wonder how that would work.
It's possible.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, when researchers have paid attention, male snakes do usually favor and almost exclusively use just one or the other. But yeah, I mean that would be really, and actually, it wouldn't be that difficult for a male. So maybe Matt, if you're up for this, you could try to get, I guess it might be a little difficult to squeeze some goo just out of one side and just out of the other. But if you could keep them separate, that would be kind of interesting to run a test on. You just scrape what I do when I'm taking samples like that, and they work okay. They're not great, but if you go ahead and I don't know if you can do it on an adult boa, but you can on a ball python. But if you get them out and just have like a piece of paper like about this big and just kind of scrape it on that piece of paper and then just set it down, let it fully dry, and then try to get it from the other side too. If we could get two separate samples and get one to test homozygous and one to test het, that would be kind of cool to see if we can kind of say, hey, yeah, it looks like one side's shooting homozygous and one side's shooting het.
Yeah, and Matt is writing here in the comments. He has been so ready to breed for so long. I am sure if I pop him, he will have plenty of sample from both sides. So yeah, and he's maybe also going to do an updated video of it.
Yeah, maybe have someone help you, Matt. See if you can keep them separated and get some kind of a sample. That would be kind of interesting if it looked very cleanly. One side only has desert ghost mutated sperm, and the other side has about half mutated, half not. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, that would be super interesting, because that's actually in Boas. We have a few in Europe. I think it's some in Germany and some in if it's Netherlands or Belgium, and that they are also like called chimera. It's the combination of like the superfire, the true leucistics, and the IMGs, where they are also like they are crisp white on one side and look like super speckled, super dirty IMGs on the other side. And they are also almost like split in half.
Wow.
So, but Superfire and IMG is a quite intriguing combination also. Seem to like you have the crisp white Superfires that proves through breeding to be IMGs, and then you have the speckled ones, and somehow it seems to be like some kind of paradoxing is almost needed for the Superfires, for the IMG to actually be able to penetrate. And usually they are then actually albino or at least het albinos, because that seems to create more of the speckles.
Interesting.
Yeah. But
that's cool stuff.
Yes. So, do you have anything else, Nate, that comes to mind? Or anyone?
Not really. I guess, at this point, I guess the biggest things that we can all do is like start collecting sheds for these traits that the tests aren't available yet. So I know like for us, our main priority was the JPC albino. Now that that's taken care of, we're pulling all of our bloods, all of our leopard stuff. really trying to, and then I'm gonna get as much of that sent out to you guys as possible. So I think that like Boa University, because we're all Boa people here, we have a lot. We throughout all of our collections, we can make up a lot of different bases there. So as a community, we should really do our best to try and get sheds to you guys. So I guess if I can provide any advice to anyone, it's basically this is really could be a useful thing. It's what you make of it. If you're willing to put in the effort collecting samples, labeling them, and sending them off, then you'll reap really great benefits from it like we have. But you have to be able to put in the effort first to get there. So
100% agree.
Yep.
I definitely think it's quite easy to think like, yeah, it's someone else is going to do it. I just get the benefits later. But like maybe you have the perfect example that actually helps provide the steps forward, and then later on you're managing to price something at 2,500 instead of 500 due to that. Oh, now it was possible to actually test it for this.
Yeah.
Yes.
just be patient and label stuff super well. I guess that's what I learned was I was sending you sheds with like paragraphs on the bag. Like, we think this is this, but it might be this. It looks like this, just be diligent and the benefits come pretty quick.
Yeah, I saw a picture of those bags with your notes.
Oh yeah.
I love seeing that. I know that there's other people as nerdy as me about snakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely is. No, it was super sweet to have you on, Ben. I think we answered most of the questions that we had. And we haven't got so many new questions during it either. So I think it's been a really good live session. And yeah. Are you guys going to Tinley in October?
Yeah, at least Sean or I will be there. Maybe both, but yeah, we always, at least one of us always goes to the October show. We've never made it to the March one, and then this year they're actually doing one in June, and we won't make it to that one. But yeah, if you can make it to one, you come to October. It seems like, especially when we were talking to the other day with boa breeders on our show, that all of them come to the October one. That's the same for JPC, right?
Yeah, we come to just March and October, but not the June show.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think the June show this year is like an add-on due to some other show was cancelled, right?
That could be
the Schaumburg, Illinois show. Yeah, was canceled. Yep, closed down. So now they added that one for Tinley.
Yeah. No, we're actually hoping to fly over for the October show, so that's
awesome.
The plan. So that would be sweet.
Yeah. Well, definitely give us a heads up if you're able to make it. We will definitely have to meet.
Yes, definitely. Sweet. Anyone that has anything else they want to add? Otherwise,
I'm just very, very thankful to be here. I've learned a lot in the last 3-6 months about boas and boa morphs. I think I'm going to have to get a VPI IMG kind of project at some point. It might take me another 6 months or a year. We've got a lot of things going right now, but yeah, that's what I've seen that I really like the most are VPI IMG with 2 or 3 kind of pattern morphs going on in there. But awesome animals, and it's really cool that you have this group going. I'm very, very thankful to be able to be on here, be a part of it, and definitely feel free to reach out to us. We have a YouTube show going, our Reptile Genetics Weekly. But if you reach out to us on IG or if you reach out to us on Facebook, messaging on there, we're usually pretty good. Some days are crazy and we might be a little slow, but yeah, please do let us know what you're excited about. Let us know what's helping. Let us know if there's problems or questions. We're very, very excited to be able to finally have this going in boas.
Sweet. And final question. Do the new website launch on Monday?
Yeah, so I'm actually getting on tonight with Sean on the phone. He said he is testing it out, and so far it's looking really good. So we are going to do our best tonight, and well, he's already doing it now. I've got a bunch of analyzing for customers I'm doing today, but we're going to do our best to try to break it every way we can tonight and tomorrow. And if we don't do too much damage and it's looking good, then yes. If it's not Monday, I think Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't think it'll be much. It's not like it's going to be another month or anything like that. I think
Sweet.
it will either be Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, hopefully at the latest. From what Sean was telling me, from what he's seen so far, it's looking pretty good.
Good. Nice to hear. Sweet. Big thanks to Nate and Ben for joining in. And yeah, for everyone in the community, like all the combinations you have, send in like for research, help RGI, Ben and Sean out. And yeah, hope to see you in the future, Ben, both in person, but maybe also revisit another live session when we all of a sudden have a ton of different new morphs discovered.
Yes.
But
it's
you
coming.
couldn't have gotten like a better start, like starting out Boa test, blah, 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 and like finding out it's something Allelic to something that's been around for over 3 decades. That's like, is probably like the best marketing trick.
Oh yeah. Well, if we could have planned it, we would have failed. So it's glad that we got lucky, and glad that
it's definitely too good to be planned.
Yes, too good to be planned. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, the Boa gods really blessed us with that. It was just all of it at once. It's crazy.
Yes.
Sweet. I wish you guys a good Saturday. You're still quite early. It's starting to get quite late. It's over 6 p.m. now. So yeah. Big thanks. And,
we'll have a nice night to you then.
Yeah. See you in the future.
Sounds
have a good one, guys. Bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye.